Sun is up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, Pastor Baker. Something that a lot of people don't know about me is that I was actually a very, very religious youth. I'm talking like on my knees at the side of my bed every night praying before I went to sleep. You know, and if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take, that sort of thing. You know, my mom took me to churches initially when I was a kid. But as I got a little bit older and a little bit skeptical, my dad insisted that I be able to explore things a little bit. And I did. Eventually, I ended up in this Acts style church. One of those places where church is where the people are, not where the building is necessarily. One of those more focused on fellowship and community than on, you know, structures. Anyway, this particular church was run by a guy named Pastor Baker. And I had a great time in that group. The discussions were low key and pretty chill and usually thought provoking, and the breakout groups were also kind of awesome. You know, got to talk about stuff I didn't get to talk about many other places. Just generally a place full of good people. And even though I was a skeptic, that's kind of what kept me there, right? But eventually, um, my skepticism, I had to be honest with myself about my skepticism, and that it was probably more than skepticism. I didn't necessarily believe that the God of the Bible, or really any Abrahamic God, was what existed, if anything did. And when I couldn't ignore that part of myself anymore, I decided to leave that particular group. Um, so I went to Pastor Baker to talk about it. Right. I told him what was on my head and what was on my heart. And he took a beat and he said, "That's okay." Said, I believe in God and I believe that God believes in you, but all of that aside, I believe in you too. There's always going to be a place here if you want it, but you know, if you have to go, that's okay. And I felt a lot of relief when he said that. I Some of the other churches that I'd been to, had a much more hellfire and brimstone approach to the wicked, right? Or they were full of parishioners that were, you know, willing to change on a, you know, almost instantly from, saintly to sanguine, right? If they found out that you're not one of the right people. And I had never seen that in Pastor Baker and anyone in that group, but I wasn't expecting that amount of grace either, you know? And I mean, clearly that conversation stuck with me, to be telling you about it here more than 20 years later. And to be honest, it's something I think about a fair amount, especially these days, In the time since I left that particular faith, I've met a lot of other people who believe different than me, not just religiously and politically, socially, intellectually, sexually, emotionally, like the whole gamut, right? And even though I'm not always great at it, I try to remember the lesson that I got taught in that talk with Pastor Baker. And I'm not sure that he intended to teach me this particular lesson, but it's the one that I took away. And that was that no matter what someone believes, there's a reality that supersedes that belief when you're sitting with a person, when you're, face to face, eye to eye, hand to hand, or heart to heart, or whatever, right? There's No matter what you believe, there is something that is more real than that belief, more important than that belief, and that is that there's a person sitting across from you. There's a person that's real, just as real as you are. And in that moment, you've got this little microcosm of community, right? No matter what happens before or after that moment, you're there. It's not lost on me that I had that conversation before social media really was a thing, before the internet was what it is, before we were subjugated to constant emotional manipulation in headlines and bylines and through lines and everything beyond that. But despite all of that stuff, I still find focusing on the reality of other humans, focusing on the humanity of other humans is really, really powerful. And not just focusing on it, but remembering that in some ways it really doesn't matter what I believe. Because if I'm open to it, I will be able to see things that are more real and more powerful than any belief at all. And for that lesson, thank you, Pastor Baker. Please remember, no matter what you've heard or what I've said, death comes for us all, and a closed mouth never gets fed. We'll talk again soon. Take care of yourself until then.